Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 5 of my Moebius 2001 Space Station V build. I was hoping to have this completed. I'm very, very close to completing it. But there's a lot more things to go over and the video was getting rather long. So I decided to post this part, which is part 5. And then the next video will be the final one for sure. Very, very close. But in this video, I get a lot completed on the base and a lot of progress on it, and there is still some more. That's why I wanted to extend it into a 6th video. But I also will complete getting together the docking bay and getting the masts off and all the lights on the station, which turned out really, really cool. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I'm continuing to refine my base for the space station. So I had not yet glued this part down. This part is fine. And I had it glued on a shorter board. It wasn't as wide. The problem was I would have had to build it up a little bit. The main thing I want down here is just a nice piece of wood. So I ended up getting this better looking, this more finished plywood. It's a nice smooth finish. And I got a piece that was big enough. So I cut it to 16 inches wide by 18 inches long, which 16 inches then accommodates the size of the painting. So when I put this on here, you can see back there it now is the right size. It's the right width. All right, so in the end, once I get something on the top and get it covered up, a little strip on the bottom, all you're gonna see is, and that's gonna be painted black, you're gonna see the painting and you're gonna see the station rotating in front of it. All right, so right now what I'm doing is I'm finalizing the various parts that allow the station to rotate and also to be removed. So let me kind of go over that. So the first thing I did, so here's the steel rod. I had said in a previous video that this little coupler for the shank of the motor, so this is 7 millimeters and the shank of the motor is 7 millimeters. But I had a heck of a time finding a 7 millimeter coupler in order to attach them together. So I had gotten an 8 millimeter one and I just tightened down the little Allen nuts there in order to kind of keep it somewhat centered. But I was concerned. I was concerned that it was not quite perfectly centered and I might get some wobble when you get out to this part of the station and it might affect its rotation. Also the fact that the part with the slip ring is going to be coming through the painting and I don't want too much of a gap there. So I was just a little concerned that that might just cause a problem. So I had gone online to get some other parts for the for this, and then I saw that they had one that was 7 millimeter. So that's what this one is right here. This is 7 millimeter. So the center hole, the bore hole, is 7 millimeters. And I thought it was strange because all this really is a piece of steel that they bore a hole out of it. They tapped some holes in the sides in order to put in these little Allen bolts, and that was it. So it wasn't like they could have run out of certain parts, so I don't know why a 7 millimeter bore hole, and I know I'm boring you with this, but sorry, I couldn't resist. But they finally got one, finally had one, so I got that in. So this is now the perfect fit. It fits perfectly on this steel tube, it fits on the shank just fine. And the other item that I purchased at the same time was this little Allen tipped screwdriver. It's actually a set of 4, and I determined that these little ones here are 2 millimeters. So this had a 1.5 millimeter, 2 millimeter, I think 2.5 and 3. But this is a nice screwdriver. So what I can do is I can get it from up here, and I can reach down in with a little bit of a gap. It's a little hard to do it when I'm on the camera. Loosen it, and also from the side here, I can reach in there too. So I can loosen these up when I want to attach the station and remove it. I looked around locally and I just couldn't find any of these. Obviously, this is your typical Allen wrench. Sorry, there's barking outside from other people's dogs. But for whatever reason, I don't know why it is, screwdrivers, other normal wrenches, they have, you know, tools with handles and easier to use. Allen wrench, they just give you this crappy little L-shaped thing. And typically, even the ones that you buy in the store have like the Swiss Army knife kind of thing where they all different sizes pop out of it. The problem is, it's just, I'd have to get right into here to get this or to get this, and it's just a lot harder. So I wanted one in the form of a screwdriver. I checked the local big box stores and they just didn't have anything. Or you could get the ones that were the big, thicker, chunkier screwdrivers with removable bits. And I didn't want to fuss with that either. So this is real easy, very simple. They weren't that expensive. And a nice tool for me to get in there and loosen that up and tighten it when I want to remove the station. So, all right. So let me show you a little list and a little mini diagram I drew up as to all of the parts that I have to plan ahead to get them all to work just right. All right, so the first thing I did is, because of the slip ring that is going to go onto the steel tube, so it's going to go in this direction, and the inner ring, which has the moving wires, is going to be facing towards the station. And the slip ring is going to be permanently glued onto the steel tube, somewhere up in this general area. And then what's going to happen is the wires that come off of the center ring, which is glued onto the ring, to the rod, I'm going to drill a hole in this. I'm going to run these wires through it and bring them up and out of the tube. And this has to be cut down a little bit so it's not too long for the station. And then the wires that come through this tube are going to then connect to, obviously, the set of wires inside the station that powers all the lights in the station. All right, so then this will rotate, the inner ring is going to rotate with the steel tube, which is also attached to the station. So that's all going to rotate in unison. The wires coming out of the back, let me close my door, sorry. It's a little bit nicer out tonight, so lots of dogs out barking. All right, so the wires that are on the outer part of this ring are going to be stationary. So only this is going to rotate, and it rotates nicely. It doesn't have any real friction or anything. But this part is going to be independent of this and the station. So I had to come up with a way to keep this outer ring in place, stationary, and then the wires from that I will cut them and then have a disconnect, and then they'll be connected to wires that'll go through this back and go into the power, so that I can disconnect those wires. But the main thing is, these wires cannot rotate with the station or they would get all twisted up very quickly, and that wouldn't work. So they have to remain stationary while the inner slip ring and the wires rotate with the station. So what I did was I first came up with this with just some styrene sheet, some styrene tube. And the hole here is basically, it's just a little bit bigger than the slip ring, but I wanted something for the slip ring to slide into and then stay stationary. So then my second idea was to do it in wood. So I used these thick wood dowels and this pressed wood that I get from the posters I've talked about in previous videos that I get from Hobby Lobby. And then I found this part, not sure where that was from, but I looked through my stash. I keep all kinds of things that I find, and I wanted something that was going to be the size of the slip ring. This was slightly too small, but I just used my Dremel and a sanding wheel and I sanded it out. So now it fits just fine. So if I put this through here, yeah, there we go. Then this fits down into there. And it fits pretty snugly too. Okay, so, but it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not expecting that to hold it in place, but it still kind of does. I mean, you can see this rotates freely. The outer one is just fine. So I was thinking about a way to try to, still, again, this has to be removable. This can't be glued into this because it's going to be glued onto the steel rod, which is glued onto the station. So this whole part, there's all of this. I will take these two things out. This whole thing will come out and be attached to the station, and the slip ring will be glued onto it as well. So what I ended up noticing is on the end of this slip ring, there's two little notches, two nice sizable little notches right there. So what I'm going to do is get a piece of metal or a piece of thick plastic or something, glue it down into this, not into the slip ring, but into this outer white ring, which is plastic. And so when the slip ring comes back, I'll just have to position it so that they click into place. Not click, but they'll just come into place and hold that from rotating. So this part, the outer ring will not rotate at all. The inner ring will. And that's not really a problem because the entire station is able to be rotated. So when I put it in, I just have to make sure that the slip ring, which is again going to be glued on here, will come back and it'll make contact. So let me kind of show you. Let me put that on. Okay. And then this will be glued permanently onto the back once I get everything positioned where I need it to be. So this is going to be permanent. The slip ring will be glued onto this. So all of this will come out of here. And then when I'm ready to attach it, I'll just slide it, the slip ring and the steel tube through into the coupler, and then use the Allen screwdriver to tighten this down in place right here, and that'll secure the whole station. And then the only thing that's going to rotate is the motor shank, the coupler, the steel tube, and the inside of the slip ring in the station. All of those are going to rotate. This will remain stationary. The outer slip ring will remain stationary. The wires coming back behind it will go into the back of the base. That will also be stationary. All right, so that's a mouthful. All right, so let me go ahead and show you what I drew. All right, so I went ahead and removed the steel tube for right now. So this is what I came up with, because these things have to be done in a certain order, and I'll explain why that is. So before I can glue the steel tube into the station, I have to cut it to the proper length. Because once I cut it, that's it. I'd have to get another one. That's a pain in the butt, and I don't want to be bothered with that. So I have to cut it. I have to put a hole in for wiring. And then I can go ahead and put the slip ring and determine the placement of the slip ring on the steel tube. Because remember, it has to come back, and it has to match up with this. So it has to just come back far enough that it just meets right into there, and I'll get those little tabs in there, like I said, to hold the slip ring. So it'll only go in so far, but I have to make sure that it's the right length, that the steel tube comes back into here, connects, and then the station is far enough away from the painting that I want it to be. So that's going to be something I have to determine, and I have to try to put as much of the station together as I can to get an idea of what that's going to be like, because I don't want it to be too far out, I don't want it to be too far back, and I want it to, look appropriate in front of the painting. All right, so those two things are important. The wooden bracket. This is a wooden bracket placement with keys for the slip ring. I cannot attach it until everything is aligned, because again, once this is on, I don't want to be tearing it back off. I don't want to be breaking it, like this motor. This motor can be shifted a little bit. I can move these two little screws a little bit. It can move a little bit this way, that way, if I need to get it centered, but I'm not doing another hole. This hole is where this motor is going, and it's not going to be changed, because that's just obviously a lot of work in getting it to where it's supposed to be. And likewise, once this is glued in place on here, it has to be centered. It has to be in the right place. So I probably won't do that at all until I have the steel tube cut, glued into the station pretty much complete, glued together. And I can literally just, without the painting, I can just put it in place. And then I can have this loose behind it and just make sure it all lines up with everything, and then glue this in place onto the wood. Because once that's on, it's going to be permanent. At that point, I can look into having a wire disconnect, running it through the back of here. And that'll be this wire right here coming out of the back. I'm going to trim that off and attach one of my Evan Designs disconnects on this side, another one, and it'll be going through the wood here. I'll drill a hole. It'll be glued in place, and a little bit of play so I can play with it and plug it in when I need to. And then coming out of the back, it will go into the power and the motor, of course, as well. I do want to have them separate. I want to have 2 different switches, same power supply, but 2 different switches. That way I can turn the lights on the station, but I can also turn the rotation on separately so that they're functioning independently. But just one power supply, which is going to be a 12-volt variable adapter that's going to plug in the back. All right. So the last thing, very last thing that I can do is get the correct hole placement in the painting. I cannot replace the painting. So that is the very last thing that I can do. Once that hole's in it, it's done. And I don't want to ruin that fantastic painting that Augie Gonzalez painted for me. So I can pretty much do that last. And that's why I've been playing with these blank canvas panels. I bought a pack of them. I think there's 3 of them. And I've been playing with the placement of the hole. And I can even have that a little bit bigger than the slip ring, because the painting itself does not have to hold the slip ring in place. That's what the wood bracket's going to do. So I don't want anything resting on the painting. I just want it to go through it so I can actually make it a little bigger, but I don't want like a big hole in it, of course. So what I've done so far, like on this one, it fits through nicely, but it's got some room. It's got a little bit of give. So this isn't going to rotate, so it's not going to catch on the painting or anything, just the inside is. But I'm just concerned about any wobble. Like I said, I don't want anything hitting the painting or chewing on it or whatever. So I just want to make sure that that's going to be the right size, but that it's placed correctly on the painting. Because, you know, then what I can do is, since this is exactly the same size as the painting, once I get that final hole and I get everything done, so I can connect the station right onto this, onto the back, everything's done, it rotates, let it run for a little bit, no issues, no problems. You know, I finish up whatever part's going to attach it on the top and the strip on the bottom. Once all of that's done, the very last thing I can do is to take this, place it over top of the painting, and use that as a guide to cut the hole in the right place for the painting. That way I know there's no problem at all, and it's not going to mess up the painting in any way. And then what I did was I kind of drew a drawing. So here's the back, here's the side here. You've got the motor, you've got the shaft or the shank, the coupler that's on the shaft, the wooden bracket, plastic housing for the slip ring with keys that goes inside, and then of course the rod that's going to come out and attach to the station. So, all right. So a lot of thought went into this because I cannot connect something that is going to cause a problem later, and I'm going to have to go back and do a lot of rebuilding, and I don't want to do that, and especially with the painting. So this part is ready to go. I did glue this on the back. It's nice and solid. It's screwed in as well. This isn't going anywhere. And I have the side supports. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on the metal tube, figuring out how to cut it. I also have to do more work on the station to finish the painting of it. Then I can start getting the station together as well. All right, so I masked off the construction ring parts with some Tamiya tape at first and just some blue painter's tape over the main bulk of it. I put a coat of black, flat black from Tamiya, airbrushed over top of it. That part isn't glued in just yet. And I'm probably going to leave that as it is because you're not really going to see it. And that's kind of the gray that I'm sort of going for. Now I didn't use the rattle can of Krylon on this like I did with the other side because I'm not light blocking anything. All I'm doing is putting down the same black base coat. A few spots I missed there I'm going to have to come back and get, but maybe not. Because when I do the lighter coats, probably like a neutral gray and then a white over top of that to bring it back up to a light gray for the whole station, I want the front and the back rings to match, and also the hub in the center to be the same colors. So I went ahead and bit the bullet and I cut my steel tube down to the right length. I also have a little hole drilled in it for the slip ring wire to go through and come out. This is the end that's going to go into the station. So I chewed it up with my Dremel, cut some grooves into it, dug some little channels into it because I want it to grip and hold it in place because this is going to rotate the station. So I ended up having to have the station very close to the painting, maybe well, not that close, maybe an inch or two from it, not that far, about an inch, inch and a half. Because in the end, when you have the two rings together with the hub in the middle and the space clipper sticking out the front, I don't want it overhanging the front of the wood base. So I put it in as close as I needed to, and it should be fine. And then this has to come through the back, through this, and into the hub, central hub, and just come out to just the edge of this. Because there's not going to be any other room. There's not going to be much room from the front the front docking bay, where I have the rod from the space clipper coming through the back, sort of like this piece. But you can see this is flush with the back of this. So I really don't have any room beyond the edge of this to be on the other side to be going further. So this rod, this tube, it's going to just come through excuse me, to the end of this, and I've already glued in two of these styrene circles with the hole in the middle. I'm going to keep the last one until I put it through. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use epoxy sculpt, 2-part epoxy sculpt. This stuff dries rock hard and it'll hold this in place, so it should not move at all. I was kind of debating about either doing that or 5-minute epoxy. What I might end up doing is positioning this and maybe even some CA glue. So the tube has to come through this hole right here, and I have that wood block in there, as I mentioned before. It comes through that, and then it's going to come through one of these, and obviously fill this whole area, and then just come to the edge of this. I have to look at the instructions to figure out which side. this little hole here, a little notch, there's a disc that goes around that, and it's only on one side, so it's not uniform. So I have to figure out which side that is. And then, so what I might do is I might start with some CA glue, and I'm going to do, well, I have to kind of play with it, because I have to put it through these two parts. I could CA glue it onto the center of these, maybe put a little bit of 5-minute epoxy in there, let it harden up a little bit, and then just pack in some epoxy sculpt, because I can't have something liquid and flowing when I seal these two together, but I want to fill that up so that the whole center is one solid piece. So I think that's what I'll do. And then this will be the part that'll be coming through to here. And a little bit of this chewed up edge is also going to be glued into here, so that'll be glued also. I just have to make sure that it goes in and it's the right position for it. Because before I can go ahead and get this glued on and painted, along with the rest of the station, which I want to do together, I have to get this steel tube glued in place. It's got to be set in its permanent position and ready to go, and let it set up overnight and really harden in there so it's not going to move. And then I can go ahead and finish a little bit of light blocking on the front ring, and then I can go ahead and get that glued in place. And I can run the slip ring through, run the wiring through, and connect it together before I put the two halves of the station together. So, okay. All right. So let me go ahead and start working on that and get this glued in place. All right, so I got the hub all glued in place with the steel tube. So I did, as I said, the first thing I did was I put the tube into where I needed it to be, right to the edge of this. And I used some CA glue, and I put CA glue around every place where the tube made contact with the plastic styrene rings. And the center one is one of the middle two. Let that set up. Then I went back and put some 5-minute epoxy liberally on the inside over all of that joint around the tube as well. And then once that's set up, I packed this entire thing filled with epoxy sculpt, filled it up, put it all together, glued the seams together, wiped off any of the 5-minute epoxy, and not 5-minute epoxy sculpt that squeezed through, and then glued these rings on. And they are on the front end of it, I determined from looking at stills from the film. So this set up overnight, this thing is rock hard. It's not going anywhere. And this steel tube is not going to come out of there anytime soon. The joints gluing on the station would break before this tube would ever break loose from this, which is fine because that's going to be its rotational point. And again, it's not moving like super fast that I'm too worried about it. The thing is only moving at 1 RPM per minute. So this small of a part of it is literally moving like this. It's just barely moving because it has to rotate one time in 60 seconds. So that's probably even too fast. It's not moving very fast. Not a whole lot of force on this or a whole lot of torque, but it is moving the whole station. So I just wanted to make sure that it's nice and solid. All right, so I have to plant a few more things. This is pretty much ready to get glued down in. I still have to glue in the docking bay on this ring. It's just taped in place right now. So I have to glue it in place. And then I'm ready to put this through and glue it in place. The only thing else I want to do, which I can't really do until I get this glued in place, is I would like to paint the part of the ring that you're going to see sticking out of the station black. Let me kind of show you. All right, so I'm just holding it in place. You can see there's not very much sticking through. It's at maybe 3 or 4 inches. There's the hole for the wiring from the slip ring, which means the slip ring is going to be just slightly behind that. I don't have to do anything with the part of the steel tube that is behind the painting. You're not going to see it. And I really don't want to paint that anyway because I don't want it to be sticking through. Well, I mean, I don't want it to be interfering with sliding it into the coupler or anything like that. But, you know, even though you're only going to see a little bit of that sticking through. I do want to paint it black just to kind of blend in. What I might try to do, well, see, it's tough because I don't want to cause any problems with it being glued into the joint here. I might just simply glue it in first. I can come back and even hand paint it black. It's not a big deal. I'd rather wait. I want to glue this. I have to glue the slip ring onto the bare metal. I do not want to put that over paint because the internal ring of the slip ring has to be able to slide on there, and there's really no play at all, and then get it glued in place. So I'm going to wait. So what I can do is get this glued in place. I do have to come up with some way then, because this thing's going to be like a top. I'm going to get some kind of styrofoam or something that has a hole in it that I can put this down inside of it once I get this in place, because it's going to be awkward since I still have to paint it and get it glued onto the main station. So I'll work on that as well, but I can go ahead and get this glued in place onto the station. All right, so in preparation to glue in the central hub, I had to first get the back construction ring side of the docking bay glued in place, which I did. I glued it inside, and I did look at the film and figure out the orientation of it. So the front ring isn't a problem. The front ring, there is no up, down, side, anything. All the rings are symmetrical, so it doesn't matter how you position this, because this could be in any orientation at all. You can move it around. Of course, it has some keys, so it could be this way, or this way, or this way, or this way. It's four different directions. But the back ring, there is a specific orientation. So the way the film shows it and the way it shows on the poster is, because this has a discernible wider edge on one side than on the thing here, you can see the bottom edge is wider than the top. This is angled a little bit, and you have this little bit of machinery right here. This part in the poster is at the bottom. Now again, this ring, none of these rings have any up, down, left, and right. It's a ring. It's rotating in space. But for the purposes of the poster and everything else, so the front version of this would be oriented this way, and then the clipper would be coming out this way, as if this were the bottom and this were the top, and so on. So the model, the filming model, has this wider part oriented with this smaller section, because these are all the same, but this is the one that I'm lining it up with, because obviously the back construction ring is not uniform. So I looked at that a couple of times, paid attention to it, looked at the poster. So this is the correct orientation for this to come down, and this would be at the bottom underneath it. So then all I have to do is when I glue the front ring onto the hub, I just have to position it so it is aligned with this. So if you were to take this and reverse it around, it would be set up the same exact way. And on the front of it, I'll have the clipper coming out as if this were the bottom view in it, and then and oriented that way. And really, you can do it any way you want. You can spin it around and put it in different ways. And obviously, and then this part here too, this cone shape on the inside, it is keyed, but there is some play. Each of the little keys has maybe about 1/4 of an inch play in it. So you can move it around to get it in the right spot. So once I get this glued on with the hub, there won't be any problem with me attaching the front station onto the hub and getting it in the correct orientation with this. So, okay, so this is ready to go. I did make up a piece of styrofoam, 2 pieces of styrofoam I just glued together with some foam safe super glue, just around the edges, so if I can break them apart if I need to use it. But it's thick enough, So once I get this into the station, I'll be able to put that down through the styrofoam so that I can support it and then do the rest of the painting and be able to also work on attaching the front station. So, all right, so I'm doing a test of the slip ring. I haven't done that yet. Assumed it would work. It's a brand new item, and it does. So what I did was I just attached a 9-volt battery onto this side, and then I attached these little bits of LED strips that I happen to have on the other side. And then the idea is this moves freely and it doesn't break the connection. The lights don't go in on and off. So it's working just fine. I'll have to trim these wires down a lot, of course, once I get it inside. But I just wanted to test this, make sure that it's functioning, and it is. So, all right, great. All right, so I did quite a bit more light blocking on the front ring. You can just see little spots of light. This is where the windows are and have the vinyl masks on them. It just leaks through just a little bit. So I think I managed to get everything light blocked. I had to go back in. These little connections here that go in, these little squares, and these parts right here along the edges were having a lot of light leak coming through them. So I first used some tulip black fabric paint, which is thick, and I put it in there pretty good down inside the holes and let it dry overnight, but it's still just kind of settled and you can still see some light. So I went back in with some CA glue and just put a little bit in with a toothpick, wiped off the excess with a Q-tip, and then I put in some accelerant to give me a nice seal over those little holes, and then went back and painted them. So I think we're where I need to be. I also brushed on some black in different spots around the ring to make sure that I wasn't getting any major light leaks. Yeah, and these look a lot brighter on the camera than they do. Well, actually, they look pretty bright in person. Sorry. But again, that's the windows peeking through, which is fine because those are going to get peeled off once I'm done. So I'm ready to go ahead and start painting on the lighter colors. So the first thing I'm going to do, I thought about doing just white over it and misting it up until I get to a light gray, but that's basically called black basing, where you start with a black coat and then you put white over it, and you have a lot of dark in the little detail and crevices. A spaceship like the Millennium Falcon, for example, that's a good technique to use because you want it to look dirty and dark and dingy and that kind of thing. But I don't want that on this. This isn't quite that dirty and weathered. So I'm going to start with probably like a medium gray or a neutral gray over it to give me a gray surface to work with. And then once I do this and the other ring, and these have to be done together so I can make sure that they match up. Then once I get the kind of medium or neutral gray over it, and that dries, I'm going to go back in over with some white and mist it until I get it up to where I want it to be. So it is a bit tricky because it's hard to get in with these little details here, which I could have waited to put on, but I wanted to try to get it all to look homogeneous. And if I do have some dark spots inside, that's going to be okay as well. But I'm ready to go ahead and do a neutral gray over this. All right, so I glued the slip ring onto the steel tube, and you can see it moves nice and freely. But the part that comes out, the wire here, goes into a hole, comes out the bottom, which I have taped up right now. But this rotates freely, and in actuality, this will not be rotating, but this will be rotating, and the station will be rotating. This will be held in place, and the wires will go back through the back to power the station. And then I glued, obviously glued the central hub onto the back ring. I also glued that other curved part for the front onto it so I can position it the way I wanted it to be. And I have the wires inside of that, but I just taped it off right now. And I went ahead and got some black on that. Sorry for the loud train in the background, if you can hear that. Lots of trains here in Muncie passing nearby my home. So this is all ready to go as far as painting this gray as well, along with the front station. So I'm going to be doing that in unison. I'm gonna have to tape this off because I don't want to get any paint on this and affect its movement. So I'll wrap this wire around it and tape it up. I don't really have to do any painting on this. This is okay. You're not really going to see it, but I'm not worrying about it, and I don't want to get any paint down in there in case you were to see the red. I do want to, at some point, paint this part of the steel tube black, but I'll probably do that by hand. It would be really hard to try to mask all this off and do it by an airbrush. And I don't want this painted, or I don't want the slip ring painted, or where it connects, anything like that. So we'll see. It's just basically to hide it if you're going to see it, but there really isn't much distance, as you can see. It's very small, so it isn't much of a problem. All right, but this is ready to go. Everything's glued in place and nice and solid. So I now brought this down to two different pieces, the back and the front of the station. So I can go ahead and start painting these the lighter grays. And then once I get them where I want them to be, I can get them glued together. This one I didn't really have to worry too much about how much black to put on. There's no lights. There's no light blocking, just the front was. So this one's ready to go as well. All right, so after putting on the neutral gray on both rings, I went back over the front ring with what I thought was flat white. But in fact, when I had gone to the hobby store recently, I bought the X2. To me, X indicating it's the gloss version versus the XF, F for flat, which is the flat white. It literally says flat white. I don't know if it's fully gloss, but it's definitely not flat. It's just white. So it didn't look glossy when I was applying it, but it really didn't do what I wanted it to do. So I realized at the end that obviously I had the wrong paint. So I had some flat white still, so I went over this one, and in the end, they didn't match. This looked whiter and too bright, probably because of the thicker paint. So I went back over this with some of the neutral gray again, just misting it on, so I could once again bring it back up with the white. So I deliberately left it kind of patchy because I wanted to have some visual interest in this ring. It isn't done yet. I still have to go over it with the white again, but just a little bit of a misting to compare the two rings. But this front ring is really just kind of boring and monotone. Certainly the lights will add some character, and the docking bay will add character as well. But other than that, the whole station is just a monotone gray. So I want to be sure to include in some various shading just to give it an idea of, a little more realistic scale. It occurred to me that in the film, the way we see it with the lighting is that certain parts, like the inner parts, are darkened. Certain parts of it are darkened. It's filmed in such a way that it looks like it's spinning in space and the light is coming from one source and illuminating it. So it makes it a little difficult to figure out what color it is, but it also gives it some realistic looks and look like a giant station. So what I'm thinking of doing is giving some subtly darker shading to some of the parts like inside here. And like I said, leaving it kind of patchy so it gives you a little more idea of scale. And it'll be spinning, of course, so that'll help with that illusion. So, okay, let me go ahead and get a little more white on this and then try to compare these two and get them to look like the same color. All right, so I have the station where I want it to be as far as the light gray painting. I do want to do a little bit more very, very subtle, like a wash in some of the areas just to give it a little more character. But I'll be doing that probably once I get the two halves of the station together. So I'm ready to go ahead and move forward with that. But first I have to get the docking bay all sorted out. So initially I had decided to use magnets, and I had put some magnets onto the inside of this and inside of this little tube. I had two magnets, and it held it on, and it was removable because I don't want the space clipper to be sticking out and be broken off when I'm transporting it. So it seemed to work pretty well, and I was playing with it, but I couldn't get a solid seal around that round edge where the front disc glues onto there. So I decided to take a different route. As I showed in the last stills, I have a, it's kind of hard to see down inside of there. There we go. You can see that little square brass tube, and there's some cotton on it to match with the space clipper exhaust. And it's glued in place, and there it is in the back. And then what I did was I put the, I did the same thing on the end of this tube. Sorry, it's hard to get the focus. Focus. Okay. Hold on a second. My goodness, focus. There we go. All right. So I have a square tube because square is going to go in there in solid, and when it rotates, it's not going to slip. And I don't have to glue this in permanently. So now I can keep the clipper separate, and I can insert it from the outside into that groove. And it goes in there pretty snug. I can even put some tape on it or put something else to give it a nice tight fit so that it's removable. And then what I did was I went ahead and I glued the docking bay into this ring. It's in there nice and solid, so I'm not getting any kind of light leaks. And what I also did, you can see right there, I painted clear Tamiya yellow. Well, first I light blocked all the edges that I needed to with some black. And I put some black in the back of that flat front part. And then I put some Tamiya yellow all around where the inner lights are going to be inside of the docking bay. Because again, keeping with the theme, which is the poster shows a yellow docking bay, or a warm white actually, warm white docking bay. Let me show you a picture of that real quick. All right, so as you can see from those stills from the poster, it's a warm white or yellowish look to the docking bay. So here it is from the back. I glued in some strip lights all around, going into it, and I have it just plugged in right now to the wires. It's in for 9 volts. I did it at 12 volts at first, but I think 9 volts is plenty bright. And there you go. Very, very cool. It comes off a little greenish on the camera, but it's not. It's more of a yellow hue. You can see better now that little square tube inside of there, mixed contact. All right, let me go ahead and stick the space clipper in there and show you how that's going to look. All right, there we go. There's kind of that classic image. You can see nicely inside of the docking bay. That brass rod with the cotton doesn't obscure the lights in the docking bay. You can see them pretty well. And this will be rotating, of course, like this. And the clipper will stay in its proper position. It's leaving the station. I put some posts out onto Facebook, and I even deliberately indicated that what I'm doing is an homage to the poster. Finally even put a picture of the poster. Still had people commenting and saying that the spaceship would not have an exhaust in space. It wouldn't be leaving the station and blasting that much of an exhaust. I agree with you. In the film, it didn't do that, but on the poster, it clearly does. So that's what I'm doing an homage to. Really cool image right there. So very happy with that. Let me turn it up to 12 volts and just show you how that's going to look at 12 if I want to do that. All right, there you go. And there it is at 12 volts. And these are rated for 12 volts, so they can certainly go up to that. And again, it's getting a lot of a greenish kind of a look, but it's really not green. It's more of a yellowish look. Camera's having a hard time picking it up. All right. But ultimately, I'll decide if I'm going to use 12 volts or 9 volts on the whole station, because they're going to have one set of wires coming out of it. I did start on the other side to remove some of the windows and see how those look. I did like them better at 9 volts as well. 12 volts just seems very bright and unnatural. 9 volts is a lot more subtle of a view. And even the camera, this tends to look pretty bright. Probably a lot brighter than it would normally be. All right, so that's all glued in place. The space clipper is ready to go. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start taking off all the masks on the back ring, the construction ring, and all the window masks. And then do any kind of touch-ups of the paint that I might have to do, and then get ready to attach all the wires together and get the two halves of the station put together. All right. All right, so as you can see in those last short videos, I got the station glued together. I still have a few more little patches to make on it, a little bit of seam work, a little bit of detailing perhaps on it. I have been asked about on some stills that I put out on Facebook, how I did my weathering. So I haven't done a ton of weathering yet, but mainly what I did, obviously, and I showed in these videos, is I started with the black base because I had to light block the front of it. And then after that, I put on the neutral gray, which is rather patchy, and then went back over that with some white. So a lot of the detail that stands out in it right now is because of that. And a lot of the darker black and the neutral gray are down in the details. On the back construction ring, I did use some weathering powders a little bit, some orange, some rust orange, some brick red to bring out a little bit different shades in that. And then I may still use some panel line, some gray panel line wash from Tamiya, which I have. I played with that a little bit, but I may or may not, we'll see. But the station's all together now. And as I showed, the light masks are all off. They look really, really nice. Looks really cool when it's rotating. And it's gonna look even better once I get it in front of Augie Gonzalez's fantastic painting and some other details that I'm working on the base. So stay tuned. Very shortly I'll be releasing the finale. I'm just getting everything wrapped up, but I did want to get this video up because it's getting pretty long. And then one more will definitely do it, and we'll go over the final things that I'm doing on it to complete this incredible build. All right, thank you to all my new subscribers, and I will see you in the next video.